If you think a woman loses desire over time, you're looking in the wrong place. Because what changes is not the feeling. It's not the love. And most of the time, it's not even her interest in you. What changes is something much more subtle and much harder to notice: her body's response. And this is exactly where most men get confused. Because from the outside, it seems simple. She feels more distant. She avoids certain moments. She doesn't respond the way she used to. And the first conclusion is always the same: she just doesn't want me anymore. But that conclusion is wrong. And the more you believe it, the further you move away from the real cause. Female desire doesn't just disappear. It doesn't fade simply because time passed. It doesn't stop existing just because the relationship got longer. It stops being accessed. And there is a very specific reason why that happens. A reason that has nothing to do with trying harder, doing more, or putting in more effort. It has to do with something almost no one has ever explained to you. And once you understand this, you stop misreading the situation and start seeing what's actually happening. You start noticing that something changed, but you can't really tell when. It didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly. Small signs that didn't seem important at first. A touch that no longer gets the same response. A moment that used to feel natural now feels forced. A presence that is still there, but without the same connection. And because it happens gradually, it becomes even more confusing. There's no clear breaking point. There's a silent adaptation. You keep doing what you've always done. The same patterns, the same approach, the same way things used to work. But the result is no longer the same, and that creates a question that's hard to ignore. If nothing visibly changed, why did the response change? And here's the first thing most people don't understand. Female desire is not a constant line. It doesn't respond to repetition. It responds to experience. And when the experience stops activating her body the right way, the response starts to fade. Not all at once, but gradually. Until one day, what used to feel natural just doesn't happen the same way anymore. And this is where interpretation starts to go wrong. Because when the response fades, the mind tries to explain it. You think it might be tiredness, then routine, then stress. At some point, you start questioning the relationship itself. But none of those explanations actually solve anything. Because the problem is not where you're looking. Most men try to understand this as something emotional. But in reality, it starts physically. Her body stops responding the way it used to. And when the body doesn't respond, the mind tries to compensate. She's still there, still present, still engaged, but without that natural reaction. And this creates a very specific type of disconnection. Because on the outside, everything looks normal. But on the inside, something is no longer being activated. And when that repeats over time, the body learns that pattern. It understands that those moments don't generate enough sensation. And it simply stops responding. No conflict. No explanation. Just silence. And when the body learns not to respond, something even more subtle begins to happen. She doesn't notice it consciously, but she starts to avoid, not in an obvious way, not with clear rejection, but with small shifts that are easy to miss. A later, a not now, a slight distance that feels natural, but keeps repeating. And the more this happens, the stronger the cycle becomes, because the lack of response creates less interest, and less interest creates even less response. And here's what changes everything. This is not a conscious decision. She's not choosing to pull away. Her body is protecting itself from something that no longer creates enough sensation. And when you don't understand this, the natural reaction is to compensate. Try more. Push more. Be more present. But that only makes it worse, because the body does not respond to effort. It responds to what awakens it. And when that doesn't happen, it shuts down. Now, pay attention to this, because this is the mistake that keeps everything exactly the same. When you notice she's not responding the way she used to, the most common reaction is to try harder, create more moments, push for more contact, try to set the mood. But that comes from a logic that doesn't work for female desire, because her desire doesn't start with intention. It starts with sensation. If her body doesn't feel, her mind won't follow. And when you try to reverse that, asking for a response before the sensation exists, the result is always the same. More resistance, more disconnection, less connection. And this doesn't happen because she doesn't want to. It happens because her body is not being activated the right way. And the more this pattern repeats, the more her brain associates those moments with obligation. And when something feels like obligation, the body pulls away even more. This is not about effort. It's about direction. Now, here's the part almost no one explains, and it changes everything. Female desire is not something you maintain, it's something you activate. And that difference is what separates relationships that lose connection from those that stay alive over time. Because when you try to maintain, you repeat. And repetition without proper stimulation leads to adaptation. The body gets used to it and stops responding. But when you understand that you need to activate it, everything shifts. You move away from autopilot and into awareness. You start noticing what actually creates response, what creates presence, what awakens sensation. And this is not about doing more. It's about doing it differently, more consciously, more attentively, more aligned with what her body needs in that moment. And this is where real change begins. There's another important point you need to understand. There comes a moment when simply changing your approach is not enough. Because when her body goes too long without responding, it doesn't just come back on its own. It needs to be reactivated. And that doesn't happen through effort. It doesn't happen through trying. It happens through the right kind of stimulation, at the right moment. Something that helps her body feel again, without pressure, without obligation, without relying on her mind. Because when the body responds first, everything else follows. The connection returns, the presence returns, the lightness returns, and what once felt distant starts to come back naturally. This is where many people start noticing a real difference. Not because they tried harder, but because they stopped trying the wrong way and started helping the body respond again. There is a simple way to stimulate that response naturally, in the moment of touch. Something that doesn't depend on effort and doesn't require forcing anything. It simply creates the right conditions for the body to react. And when that happens, you don't need to convince. You don't need to push. The response comes, light, natural, effortless. If you want to understand how that works, I left it in the description. And if this kind of content helps you understand what's really happening, subscribe to the channel. Because there is still a lot no one has explained to you yet, and it can completely change how you see your relationship. If you made it this far, remember this clearly. The problem is not that she doesn't want. The problem is that her body stopped responding the way it used to, and that changes everything. Because this is not solved with pressure, not with effort, and not with the wrong interpretation. It's solved with understanding, with direction, with the right way of activating what is still there, but not being accessed. And before you leave, hear this. This does not mean your relationship is over. It does not mean she stopped caring. And it definitely does not mean you lost something that can't come back. It means there is a process happening, and it can be adjusted. And now, you're no longer in the dark. You understand what's really happening, and you know there is a path forward. And that alone changes everything.